Here we go, it's recording.
Well, wasn't it nice for me?
Testing. It's on. This doesn't appear to be on.
This was live.
Right.
Now it's on.
Testing. Oh, that's on.
Right. I put that one's on.
It's already recording already. This is on. Okay. Now why is this not working? It's already recording. Yeah. What? Why? I think we should give it a couple minutes just in case some people straggle in. Ah, they're just struggling.
Too late. You're all set up with the
Yeah.
recording.
Yeah, it's actually already recording, so be careful what you say.
It will be held in evidence against you.
All right, I guess we should get started. We're what stands between everybody here and the cocktail hour. So I guess that explains the huge crowd we've got gathered here. This is a session on successful entrepreneurial strategies within growing markets, and there is the session topic. I think a lot of what sort of buried in that topic is the question of how entrepreneurship can flourish within larger companies. So we're going to talk a lot, I think, about the difference between being entrepreneurial in a small company environment and being entrepreneurial in a large company environment. Here are the speakers. I'm Neal Goff. I'm president of my own consulting firm called Egremont Associates. I will speak very little because I'm here to ask the questions. And I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And in so doing, just to kind of kick this off, obviously who you are, what you do, but also try to identify sort of one entrepreneurial activity you've been associated with that was particularly successful, and say a little bit about why you think it worked. So I'll start with Vineet, I guess.
Okay. Thanks, Neal. I'm not sure we need the mics because there's about 15 of us in the room. We could probably just walk around in it.
Yeah, everybody on the front row.
Maybe we should all do introductions first and just kind of
Should go around the room, actually.
get a couple bottles of wine and have a nice conversation. And so Vineet Madan, founder and CEO of a new company, edRNA. We've been around for a few months now. Before that, up until about March or so, I was at McGraw Hill Education. I had many meetings, sometimes traumatic, in this building upstairs, doing a variety of things, but ran strategy, corporate development, venture investments, tech R&D, partnerships, acquisitions, founded and ran a tech incubator inside the organization. What else did I do? Business process management, Six Sigma operational improvement. And my last special little project there was carving out McGraw Hill Education from the McGraw Hill companies and selling it to Apollo, which is a deal we closed earlier this year.
Just a little thing.
Little thing, but a lot of experience kind of working across all the different levers that people might think about, whether it's internally incubating new ideas within a large company, which we did in formative assessment and institutional sales, marketing, and product development in our higher education business when I was there. Did a bunch of partnerships in adaptive learning and interactive textbooks and interactive content, and also acquired a couple of businesses along the way in lecture capture, and one with Chris Willig, who's sitting in row number 2 for interactive math tools as well. So have used pretty much all the quivers that you can to really stimulate entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking in the context of a big organization. And now it's a little easier because there's a lot fewer of us involved. There's a couple of us now, and we're kind of going hard at an opportunity that we see in the hybrid learning space in the college market. So an opportunity window opening up about a year ago. I thought the MOOCs probably had about 2 years or so until they imploded. The good news is I was right. The bad news is I was wrong, and it happened a lot faster than I thought. So we've got to move a lot faster as a smaller company, but certainly an exciting time in the market, and glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Holly DeLeon. I am with McGraw Hill in a new division that is a partnership with an Israeli company called Time to Know. I got to this position in a very circuitous route because I started off as an educator, as a speech pathologist, ran a speech and hearing clinic for many, many years in the Fort Worth area. When I went to the dark side and went to the company side, I started working with, this is in the early years of technology, and you had these smart little techie guys that were in the back room who were developing all this innovative technology, but they didn't have a clue about education, especially about reading, and that was my background. So I was one of the founding members of the education division at Leapfrog. So we took a consumer company that had been in the toy market and created an education division. Grew very rapidly, took it from 0 to 80 million in about 6 years, so that was a very rapid growth. Went on to work in other ed tech companies. The last was with the LiveScribe pen. You might know the smart pen that we started the education division there. And so when McGraw-Hill was in the process of taking on this new division within the company, they approached me about coming in to do that, and it is very interesting to see it. Now, Chris has been here for a long time. You've been through a lot with a lot. Well,
That makes you a veteran.
it's all relative, Christine.
Dog years.
There you go.
That when McGraw-Hill did this partnership, they didn't absorb it into the company as a whole. They kept it as a separate entity. So we have a separate sales force, we have a separate marketing department, we have a separate operations department. And I think that's an interesting shift. And it was very appealing to me because I came out of this ed tech startup world. And so it's startup, but it's within the context of a larger company. And I don't know if you feel this or if you would agree with this, but to me it seems like it brings a different set of eyes. It brings an excitement, and it brings, in an entrepreneurial way, you never really know what's around the corner because you haven't built it yet. So it has brought a different spirit there, and I find that to be really exciting.
Excellent. It's Kevin Pawsey. You have to get used to the accent. I've actually been in the US for this is year number 9 now. So I actually originally trained, it sounds like a resume this, doesn't it? So it's originally trained as a teacher. I lasted about 18 months in the actual education world before I bailed out into the commercial world. I started some music education consultancy businesses. I started up a music technology school in the UK, so I'm a musician at heart, and still play the drums and do all that kind of funky stuff. I sold out those businesses in around about 2000. I was actually competing against a big UK company called RM, Research Machines. They offered me a position, and I was in RM for 11 years, and I've pretty much always in their skunk works. And I think that was a really good method for a big UK company. It was the largest educational technology provider in the UK, had about 3,500 staff, did about $600 million per year. And I was a guy from an entrepreneurial background, started some companies, completely the wrong fit for a big corporation like RM. So RM was very traditional, didn't really know what was what, and very entrenched in sort of the operational history that they had. They asked me to join them initially on a 6-month contract to look at how we could push something called an interactive whiteboard. So I one of the first companies to put interactive whiteboards into UK schools. They developed a piece of software called RM Easy Teach, and that grew really quick. As a result of that, they asked me to stay. They gave me some other interesting jobs to do, one of them which was to actually grow RM internationally. So in 2005, over 99% of their revenues were based in the UK, and obviously that's a bit of a risk, very small market, and they wanted to understand what it would take to try and get some international revenues. So they convinced me to go and understand if there was a market for UK educational technology products globally. So I spent a year flying to the Middle East, flying to the US, understanding what that opportunity was. Returned to the UK after about a year of understanding what channels, what strategies, what product, what needed localizing, what was viable, what wasn't viable, was it hardware, was it software, was it services. So I made a recommendation to the board that we should focus on the US. They said, fantastic, you've got 6 weeks to move. So I up sticks from the UK and came to the US. For the first 2 years, half the company didn't even know we had an operation in the US. It was really a stealth operation. We were deemed to be the risky business unit. We was actually funded directly from the UK. And we grew it pretty quick. So in the first year, we did about 200k in the US. When we exited in 2011, we got it to about 50 million. That was then successfully sold when RM had a different strategy about global markets. And I think the key was having that real strong leadership at the top. So everyone was really kind of clear at the management level that this was a bit of a risky operation, but it was supported, it was financed, it was understood that this was going to be a long-term burn. But what they didn't want to do was actually distract the rest of the organisation. So as we grew, it became very much in the public domain within the organisation that the US was actually going pretty well. And there wasn't a part of the company that didn't want to use the US as a sales channel, come out to the US and actually explore different opportunities and things like that. So I think initially it was actually really useful having that sort of clear run without the big company distraction of everyone trying to come across to the US and see if they could actually push their units through that particular sales channel. But the leadership was unwavering. They made a complete strategic decision that we wanted to be successful in the US. They made sure that products, whatever we needed in the product, there was budget available to do it. The funding was there to do it, and the support from the parent company was there. So even though it was highly risky for them, there's many companies that have tried to be successful in the US from overseas. But I think the leadership made a real difference, and they were unwavering in their support.
So, Kevin, I'm going to ask you a little later what you're actually doing now, because that's none of this.
So I'm currently consulting for some different companies. I just exited a company called edRNA, which is a learning platform company. I was the CEO for that organisation. And I'll be able to tell people what I'm doing full-time next week. So they'll be making an announcement for me.
Okay, but we're not going to hold everybody here that long, are we?
So I'm actually going back into a startup. So it's a well-funded startup. It's actually another international company coming to the US, and I'm hoping to repeat history. So they've already got a presence. They're actually very similar to kind of RM in terms of they've already got infrastructure overseas, and I'm going to try and do exactly the same thing for another company. So this is number 3 while I'm in the US.
So, Vineet, I'm going to ask you a question that was not in the script that we prepared here. So as a veteran of McGraw, seeing what Holly's doing and how it's structured, what do you think of that setup?
Yeah, I think one of the things in the big companies, and Kevin mentioned this as well, is at a very early stage, it's easy if you're sitting in executive offices and in boardrooms, and I've sat in a few, to look at types of new initiatives and say, well, it's incremental expense, and if we want to optimize margins in any given year, just flip the switch, turn them off, redeploy the resources, and do something else, right? Because you can always hire another 5 salespeople. I've yet to go out and meet a product team that says they couldn't use another 5 salespeople, right? So I think that there's always other ways to redeploy resources, and I think Kevin said it well, so I'm not going to add a lot more to it, is it really does take the strength of conviction, strength of leadership to say, no, we're actually not going to do that. We actually are going to do something very differently, and no, you can't touch it and take the budget from it, and we're going to be in this for the long haul because we see longer term value creation. So, and there was examples of things that we did at McGraw Hill when I was there. We did some of these things with adaptive learning and interactive textbooks where we kind of did them within the organization but on the side of the organization, incubated them for multi-year periods because we knew that's what it was going to take. But we also had a pretty strong belief and conviction that the market was going to eventually catch up to where we were going. But in order to get there, you really have to test and experiment early, and if you don't, you won't learn, and if you don't learn, you're not going to be successful. So I think Kevin said it well. It is a good approach of kind of cleaving things off to the side, but letting them tap into the mothership, if you will, to get the right resources when they need them. So there's no need to build yet another payroll system. There's no need to kind of build a brand new marketing function from scratch unless you absolutely need one, right? You already have resources you can tap into.
So we had to. So and it was a bit of a reverse situation. So for legal reasons, we weren't allowed to use the in-house systems from back in the UK. So we actually implemented Salesforce here. We had our own accounts system. So the UK wasn't using Salesforce, but because we were so successful with Salesforce, they actually implemented it back in the UK. So we actually taught them to do some stuff as well. But for legal reasons, yeah, we couldn't actually use the company systems overseas at the time.
Yeah,
But
I'd
you
say
don't
it is something.
sound like you felt you were hamstrung by not being able to use corporate systems.
It was because you're actually creating a new business. So fundamentally, you're capitalising on the brand, capitalising on the products that might actually need some sort of localisation and development work. So you're really capitalising on that brand, but having the ability to run much quicker than the parent company, and that was the mandate. And the CEO was really clear. The global CEO was, you guys have actually got to lead the way. So don't get encumbered with what we currently do, because they were trying to create that entrepreneurial spirit and actually trying to sort of knock down the barriers. And that really worked well. Okay, so
you both mentioned the importance of leadership and support from above, but I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy. Because okay, that's a given. But what else? Because after all, with all due respect, Vineet, I don't think McGraw Hill in your tenure was known as being an entrepreneurial company. So there's got to be some other factors here. So aside from leadership, what makes it possible for large companies to be entrepreneurial or not possible?
Yeah, can I say leadership a different way, which is, it's got to take folks like Kevin did, right, who are willing to, and Holly's doing now, to take those risks, to say, look, I'm going to jump into this new thing. It may work out, it may not work out, but I feel pretty strongly about the potential that these things have in the market, and they, as owners of these projects and initiatives, know that they can do something about it, right? So they can create new value, they can deliver new value. So yeah, look, there's leadership on the top, which makes sure that funding and resources and being able to tap into the brand and corporate systems, maybe not, right, are all there. But that in and of itself doesn't guarantee any success. All it does is guarantee an opportunity. The thing that does increase the probability of success in a material way is having folks who are skilled operators, who are seasoned veterans, who have done these things many times before, and who can rinse and repeat and say, look, I get the situation, I know what the top 5 things they're going to need to do are. So it's having the right folks on the ground who are going to run and direct the efforts and be fully committed to them day in, day out, that help make those things possible. So yeah, like I said, it's a different way of saying leadership, but the truth is, if you're a venture investor looking at startups, and I've invested in a couple too in my day, one of the big things they all test for, and we heard it a couple of times on stage today, it's the team, right? That they're investing primarily in the leadership team. And it's no different in a big company, right? You're backing, in that case, probably a little bit more the idea and the team. In a venture world, it's team first and then the idea, right? But it's basically, you've got to get that right mix of both.
So Holly, you're in a unique vantage point where you can look at a small entrepreneurial company with the eyes of a large partner. You can look at the partner through the eyes of the entrepreneurial company. From the vantage point, what are the best things you see looking at in both directions, and what are the worst things you see?
Yeah, I mean, to me, part of what I see happening, and you see it differently when you're in a small company, because everybody's kind of living on the edge, and so we kind of all feel like we're in the same boat. But when you're in this position where we're basically in startup mode, but within a large corporation, I almost feel sometimes like we're on a missionary journey. We're out there. We are the zealots. We are preaching. We are rallying the troops to say there is a new horizon out here for education, and we're going to try to be out there in the midst of that. And what you see happening with that is that enthusiasm and that excitement that you have for something new starts flowing out to other divisions within the company. And so what has happened in the past, we've been at this about 1.5 years, is that as different groups within the company hear about what we're doing, and they're hearing it peripherally. It's not like we've landed a $10 million account out in New York City. It's like we're still out struggling to get the word out and to get the concept out. But other divisions within the company have kind of caught wind of that, and they come to us and say, what is this? Tell me what is this about? And so that has started to spread through the company, and at the same time, as we all know, we split off and the Apollo buyout and stuff. So that was a time when it kind of got to the point of saying, okay, it's okay that we're going to change, that we're going to be different, we're going to do things differently, we're going to think differently, and that has been from the leadership, from the top, when Peter Cohen came in, and has infiltrating within the company, so that I talked to Jeff Livingston earlier today, and he says, what he says when he's talking to government leaders is, this is a 125-year-old startup, and that's how they are thinking about it, because it has to be reinvented. And we all know what the changes are upon us. It's not like they're coming, they're here.
So another aspect of this is how you actually recognize opportunities, and what's the difference in the process that small companies use to recognize entrepreneurial opportunities versus big companies. Can you comment on that a little bit?
To me, it's very different. It's again, living in the beginning, early stage startup world, the opportunities don't come to you. You go seeking those opportunities. There's been many a time that I've sat there and I've had 6 months of begging Microsoft to come to the table, and finally we get them to the table. Where now in this scenario, well, Microsoft's coming to us and Apple's coming to us, and so it's a very different world. You still have to do the same type of negotiation, but it is a different opportunity world when you have a recognized name that is valued in the industry, and people are coming to you, where in years past that definitely wasn't the case.
And then Vineet, you probably have done the sort of largest kind of 180-degree turn within these last two things you're doing of anybody. Can you talk about the differences between the two situations?
So I left a multi-billion-dollar operation to go to an operation of me and my partner. So it's is a big turn. But I'll tell you my experience has been as far as the process almost exactly the same for finding new opportunities. So, and maybe it's because I was trained as a consultant in years gone past, but it always comes down to, and it sounds a bit rote, but you kind of go out there, you spend time with customers, see what their problems are, what their needs are, develop hypotheses around those, test those hypotheses, validate the hypotheses, improve what you're doing, tweak wireframes. And so we kind of went from the process where I left McGraw Hill at the end of March. I literally signed the papers to sell the business to Apollo and left the same day. Took a week off with my family and then started working on this next idea that I had. And we kind of went through the whole process from initial thoughts to hypotheses to wireframes to initial alpha product to product in the field. We actually deployed the first version of our stuff on 6 campuses this fall. Started generating revenue last month. So the whole pace of innovation on the startup side, at least in my single experience right now, is very, very different from what I saw in a large corporate environment. So in a large corporate environment, we stimulated a lot of new things as well, but we probably had at least 6 months of meetings upstairs on the 49th floor, which is the executive offices of the McGraw Hill companies, talking about the same thing before we could even get commitment to enlist resources to do the first piece of market research, right? In the same time, my co-founder and I went and did all that, and it actually got seed funding. We haven't announced it yet, so keep it quiet. And did all that in about the same amount of time it would have taken to finally get approval to kind of get the first tranche of investment to do some market research. So, but the process itself is the same, but the pace of the process is very, very different.
I would agree with
But, you mentioned something that actually is one of the big things I wanted to ask about, and I, having spent 30 odd years at large corporations myself, it seemed to me that the hardest part about entrepreneurship was those guys. It was the inordinate amount of energy you had to put into getting approval or permission to do what you wanted to do, rather than the energy. All of that energy could have been put into actually doing it. The question is, without sort of just kind of falling into the cliche about that, is the process, how different is the process of getting investors to invest in your idea from the process of getting senior executives to approve your idea?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Neal, because I don't think most people think about it the way you just phrased it. And I'd say it's almost the same. So it basically comes down to a couple of factors, which is trust. Actually, it's pretty much the first and foremost is trust, right? So whether I was upstairs pitching on the 49th floor to get, tens of millions of dollars to go buy a company for the education division of McGraw Hill, or if I'm out meeting with prospective investors to invest in this thing that I just started, I'll tell you the greatest success I had in both of those types of instances is where I established a relationship with the person on the other side of the table, where I built a reputation for myself. And beyond whatever the idea I could bring to them on a set of slides was, is they were investing more in me and the team that I was bringing to bear to solve the problem than it was the idea itself, right? And it took me a long time to realize that that's actually what was happening in these meetings, and frankly, the trust didn't happen in the meetings. So in a big company environment, it all happens outside the meetings. That's when you do all your relationship development and building, and that's when you get consensus for what you want to do. The meetings are more of a formality, they're a little bit of a show. In a smaller environment, it's not terribly different, right? Except I don't have to go through 15 levels of approval and PowerPoints to figure out what I want to do. My co-founder and I sit down, we throw a couple things on a board, and we kind of pick a path. And maybe we talk to one or two of our advisors that we've got engaged as well. But the process of going out and getting the investment and the support for those things is the same. It comes down to trust, right? So do they trust us, and do they trust that we found the right opportunities and we know how to deliver against those opportunities?
And I'd play off of one thing, and I train this in my sales reps, but it works the same within a corporate environment. And I'll go beyond the trust, because I'll say that we have a BLT approach, and you've got to have all aspects of that. And is that the person that you're talking to, whether it's an investment company, whether it's a customer, or whatever, do they believe you? Do you come across in a believable way? Do they like you? You know, if I have an obnoxious sales rep out there, nobody's going to buy from them. And do they trust you? And that is a process that has to be built. And when I sat in investor meetings and I'm sitting across the table from potential investors in these early startups, that was part of it. You had to win them over, and by winning them over, you had the opportunity to gain their trust. And we do the same thing now. You know, we have internal kinds of buy-in that we have to do, and so we have to, when I'm in the corporate offices, you know, I go up to Charlotte Frank's office up here because we need that support. When I'm in Columbus in the office there, I'm making the rounds because we're the new kid on the block. We've got to be believed and accepted within the organization.
So I think with that goes risk. So you've got to be in an organization that accepts risk as part of this process. And I think in terms of the organisations I've worked with, I've been lucky enough where, you know, with really good financial modelling, that the risk is understood. But you will make mistakes. Things will go wrong. You're going to have to change direction when you don't realise that you should change direction. You're going to find something that's not working in the product. I agree, people are absolutely key. If you don't have the right people that are actually thinking in that entrepreneurial way, if they're the wrong fit and they expect all the corporate benefits that go with this particular role, you know, they've got the excitement, but then they want the 9 to 5 position, it's probably not going to work. So, you know, they've got to be passionate, they've got to believe in it, but the risks really have to be understood. And I think that was the key deciding factor in many of the decisions. You know, do you have someone that actually accepts risk? And in big publicly traded companies, and our was a big publicly traded company, everyone was risk averse. So you've got to try and sort of give them that confidence that actually, you know, this is risky. We are going to make mistakes, and that's a relationship thing. I agree. You've got to build that rapport.
But and it occurs to me that the three of you at this table are uniquely, apparently comfortable in large company and small company environments. So is there a personality type? This doesn't sound like it's for everyone.
I mean, I think Kevin actually captured it well. I mean, it's the willingness to not only accept risk, but embrace and find those opportunities, right? So for me, kind of climbing the big corporate hierarchy, there's a couple ways you can play. You can play it safe, sit back, kind of nod and smile, you know, get behind the things that you know are going to get approved, right?
Absolutely.
And have a very long, successful corporate career. I'm too young to do that, so I didn't want to do that. And I said, look, if I'm going to be anywhere, and I've got 3 little kids too, and working in education has become a very personal endeavor for me. I want to do what I can to make the business and the process of education better for them than when I had it, right? I mean, ultimately we all turn to dust and disappear. But if we can make the world a somewhat better place than what we had, why not try and do it, right? So that's the way I looked at it. So I was never worried about my job, never worried about my bonus, never worried about any, you know, the next promotion. Frankly, it didn't matter to me at all. And that's just the way I operate. But what did matter was making sure I was staying true to my beliefs. I was being honest and open with people. I was being candid about risk because it was all over the place when you're doing new things. And I was willing to accept the downside, which is if things didn't work out and they were going to look for a scapegoat,
it's a one-way street.
I stepped up to the front, and I knew it was going to be my head on the block. And that's life. And either you're comfortable with that as an approach, or you're not. If you're not comfortable with it, you probably shouldn't be doing entrepreneurial things in a small company or a big company. if you are comfortable with it, you can do pretty amazing things.
I think in a big company, so I was actually seen as the go-getter guy. So anything that needed sorting out, I'd be in there sorting it out. I'd be sort of waving the flag, new ventures, you know, that was my bag. But my best relationship was with the CFO. So the CFO was my conscience, and that worked really well because I'd be coming up with these mad, crazy ideas of can we expand to the Middle East, can we expand into Australia? But what are the models? Is it worth it? What are we going to spend to actually get there? So having a really good CFO, you know, he can do the battles back in the boardroom. So I just want to go out there and actually find the opportunities, make the good stuff happen. But a really good financial manager, that was my key. So he did a lot of my battles for me.
And how about you? Because you don't exactly fit the profile of the typical.
Well, I think it does require, it's a different kind of person. When this whole partnership thing with McGraw and Time to Know was coming about, they put out feelers within the company for people who were, I won't say that they were disgruntled with their job, but they wanted to take it to the next level. So they were looking for new things. They wanted to get into digital. They wanted to get into digital curriculum. And so they sought out people that were of that mindset. But it takes a different personality. It is not a 9-to-5 job. It is wearing 5 different hats. It's not saying that's not my job, because you might have 5 different jobs, and 6 months from now you might have a completely different set of 5 jobs. And so it does take a different personality, and it was very important for Dan Caton was the CEO at the time. Very important for Dan Caton to pull together a team that didn't mind the risk, didn't have to have a path because there was no path. You had to completely create the path yourself. You had to be very comfortable with uncertainty because you didn't know what was going to be coming around the corner. You could make your predictions, but it was untried. We didn't have any path or track to go on. And so he pulled together people that embraced that. That's what they wanted. They liked that. And you know, quite frankly, it's the reason I never wanted to come work in a large publishing company, because I like can you build it, can you take nothing and make it into something? And so when you're doing that, you also have to attract people that believe that. And so when I go looking for salespeople, if I'm in a startup mode, I need a totally different salesperson than I do if I'm in a more established company. And I need somebody who can think differently. I use the word missionary, but that really is what it's like. When you're out there and nobody's ever heard of your product, they've never heard of your genre, you better have a salesperson who can convey that. And that's a different kind of salesperson than an established company.
Okay, I'm going to open up to questions from the floor. I do want to make note of the fact that if your structure was done under Dan, that means it was done in the old McGraw-Hill when Vineet was still there. So I take back everything I say about McGraw-Hill as being entrepreneurial. So any, yes, sir?
So just to your question that you were saying about salespeople. So for a startup, usually resources are limited.
Yeah.
That salesperson that a startup can afford to hire is usually not the most experienced person in the world. However, maybe that's where you need to focus all of your resources as much as possible. In your opinion, for that startup salesperson, do you hire senior? Do you hire junior? Do you hire somebody from the higher education space?
Yeah.
Or do you hire somebody from the technology space and train them on higher ed? I'm just curious to know your opinion.
And it is a different thing depending on what the product is. And so I'll take an example of Leapfrog. Okay, so that was a new technology product. It was in the pre-K to 2 in the early years. So I needed somebody that understood early literacy in that early age range. But I didn't have any budget. I couldn't hire full-time dedicated salespeople. So I went out and used independent salespeople that would work for commission only, so I didn't have any benefits to pay, I had no salary to pay, but they were established in their territories. And so the trick to that is if you are using independent salespeople, they have other product lines. So my first task is to convince them that my product line is going to make them more money than all those other product lines. And so that is a sales job I have to do with them, and you have to completely indoctrinate them with the theory and the philosophy behind what you're selling. And so that's how we started. So in the first year, we had independent salespeople in 5 territories, and by the time that I exited, we had completely flipped it to where I only had 20% of the people that were independent, 80% were full-time employees, and we had 135 salespeople altogether.
Sorry, just quick follow-up. May I ask, is there a particular resource you go to find these?
There is unfortunately not.
Legwork.
It is,
Yeah.
you go find a good
Absolutely.
one, and you say, who do you know? And they work with other people, and they'll tell you who the good ones are, and they'll tell you who the terrible ones are, and they will pick up the phone and they'll call John and they'll say, John, you've got to look at this product. This is the coolest thing you have ever seen. And then now you have a connection to John. And so you go find those people, and they are networked, but there is not an organization per se that you can just go pluck from.
Can I offer a
just wanna-
slightly different perspective on the question first?
Can I just
Yeah, go
run
ahead.
one thing? Did you say that those first 5 independent sales reps were commission only?
Commission only.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. So, because I'm starting out from nothing, right? So the first money in the business was my own. So I can't hire tens of sales reps either, right? So I've been living this exact same question. And I'll tell you, I'm playing on a very interesting mix of demographic trends and economic trends over the last 5 years. And I'll tell you what they are at the risk of spoiling my secret sauce and creating more competition for myself. Is one, we've got an aging workforce and aging population, right? So I've actually found remarkable numbers of people who've got great relationships in the field, who've got trusted relationships with their customers, who are quote unquote retired, right? So they've been retired by a lot of the big companies, or they've chosen to retire, but they're not willing to completely stop working. They're still actively engaged, want to be productive members of society. They've got time, they've got interest, they've got relationships, and making a few bucks on the side, given who knows what's going to happen with Social Security, probably isn't such a bad thing, right? So we've been tapping into some of those folks on an opportunistic basis, and in some cases we know who they are. In other cases, exactly as Holly described, it's networking, right? You got to get out there and just kind of figure out who the right people are. And the other kind of macroeconomic trend is that we've all lived through in this space the kind of prolonged economic recession and contraction. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs shed across the industry. There are no shortage of people who know the space and know the space well, and sometimes due to underperformance, but sometimes just due to being in the wrong place at the wrong time at the wrong company, find themselves in a position where they've got skills and relationships but just aren't being adequately or fully employed in the capacity that they'd like. So again, there's no magic list of these people, and I haven't found a website or an email list I can go to, but I just talk to a lot of people that I know and kind of network my way in and find people who are willing to look at different types of compensation models as a way of reestablishing themselves. That they get an opportunity to work with a startup, get reacquainted in the community, reestablish themselves with the customers where they already had some relationships, be carrying something new and interesting, so that relationship is seen as valued again, and are willing to do it at a compensation scheme that's more affordable for me. So I think it just requires a little more creativity.
Kevin, how about, you said you arrived in these shores to build a business, and it was just you. So I assume you needed some people other than yourself to sell. So what did you do?
So, we made a conscious decision pretty early on that we were not going to grow our own sales team. So very similar kind of route. So there is no magic list. I did try and find one. I paid people to try and create one. Very disappointed with the time spent on that.
By the way, it's a great idea
That's
for a
great.
business for
Absolutely.
anybody.
Probably going to do it next. But yes, we spent quite a lot of money trying to find a shortcut. There isn't any. So I think that's that's fairly clear. We decided to go down the distribution route to begin with because we thought we had a product. It was actually a pretty good fit for the surge in sort of interactive technologies that actually happened.
And you had high-ticket hardware, right? So
Yes.
So that's a different economics. And
Yeah, so we had hardware, software, but the comp models were up for discussion. So coming from a big corporation, everything was laid out for you depending on tenure, seniority. You knew exactly what you was going to earn if you sold direct to customers. There was a pay scale that was really there. So we had to come up with some very creative compensation schemes for distribution partners as well. Because obviously we wanted to retain some of the cash. They might want 60%, we want 60%. Coming up with the models that work and putting in targets, thresholds, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a bottom-up approach. We had to find the right organisations. So It really is the 80-20 rule. So 20% of our distribution channels did 80% of the business, and you learn very quickly where to go and put your resources. But there is no magic source to that. That's just purely hard graft. I think it helped with the second company because we actually managed to get some pretty good goods pretty quickly because we just went back to that same route again. Will I use that again? Absolutely. So I'll stay with the list actually. So we can talk afterwards.
But I would also say that, because I've gone down the path of using distribution companies as well, that it does completely depend on that organization. There are some organizations out there that are just not in a mindset
Even
of
if
doing.
they're good, you have to keep them engaged.
Yeah, they're gonna sell commodities.
Yeah.
That's how they make their money. If you are a new product or a new concept coming in, they are not going to take the time to be able to learn that product well enough to be able to articulate the message. So you have to really balance. You know, there are some organizations out there that are strong from an education background and they get it. There's some that don't have any. I mean, they don't know how to talk the talk at all. So you really have to get in and evaluate not only the guys or women at the top, but you have to look at who they've hired within their organization.
So I'm going to ask a question that's maybe almost a rhetorical question, but in the last couple of days, had a couple of entrepreneurs stand up and say, don't even think about sales and marketing until you get the product right. And then this group clearly seems to at least imply that you need to be thinking about sales and marketing from day one. Is that?
Yeah, I think you've got a proof concept. So there's no point having a product completely finished and take it to market and find out you're wrong. And I have had that. So taking UK product into the US, you know, that product's already there. I think you've got to go out, you've got to test it, you've got to see how it needs to be adapted. So I'm always thinking about what the sales channel is going to be before you've even thought about the marketing. I think you've got to build the awareness. There's really cost-effective ways of doing it. Lots of free PR that you can get. You can start to use the partnerships to do some of the work for you. But I wouldn't wait to have the product finished before I think about trying to find the right market for it. That sounds crazy.
Oh, I think it's the opposite. I think you have to seed the market
Absolutely.
early on. You've got
Yeah.
to seed the market before you ever have the product finished.
Correct.
You go out there with proof of concept and you get your pilot sites established and you start generating interest, you start generating testimonials, case studies, all of those kinds of things that feed your marketing program. But if you wait until the product is completely finished, then now you're starting from scratch, and it's about a 2-year build-up. And so I think you have to start all of that stuff early on and seeding the market with just your messaging way before you're ready to launch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit of an approach that may have worked 10 years or so ago, but and maybe it would have worked 10 years ago. But I'd say now we're very much, and you know, and it got mentioned in the auditorium earlier today, the whole lean startup approach, right? You kind of validate your needs, build with your customers, and iterate. I don't know how you just kind of sit back and you know in an office and build stuff, not knowing whether or not people are going to use it. I say get people committed to using it, and then start building it at the same time they're using it, and update and change it with them in real time. So.
And I think education now expects it as well. So I think they understand that software is a roadmap, and I've always explained the roadmap to customers. You know, it's learning to direct district sale, and it wasn't ready. It was a Norwegian product, and it just wasn't fit for the US market. But we managed to secure those early adopters by painting a picture in a year, 18 months. This is where it's going to be. Hard to win RFP sometimes, I'm not promise. But you can paint a picture of where you're going to be, and if it's aligned to their needs, then that's fine. I think US school districts now understand that this is a journey, and they're not expecting just something to land and be 100% out of the box. I think they're realistic.
Joanna?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. We do a lot of early adopter feedback pilots, but I'm curious, have you experienced when it's almost too early, where they're getting a bad taste because there's still a lot of kinks? You know, and you can paint the picture, but if they're out there actually piloting with their students and too many things, so how do you kind of work that balance?
First of all, I think you have to set expectations. And when you set the expectations and say, this is a beta product, and we are going to come to you, we want your feedback, and we're going into it telling you that this product is not perfect. But if it's so unperfect that they have such a negative experience, I don't think you get to go to round 2.
Right.
And
So it's a bit of a delicate
It is,
balance.
and so what is having enough of the bugs fixed within the program so that you have a positive experience? I think that they'll abide by, you know, a box that it doesn't click exactly right, or, you know, whatever. But if they're encountering bug after bug after bug, and it's taken all of their time to do that, I think that they'll say, no, I don't think we're going to do
But
that.
it's the expectation. If it's a pilot, you're
Yeah.
actually telling them, you know, they're going to actually help build this product, and they're going to feed back into the product, and that's fine. That's a two-way process. But if you're out there saying this is, you know, this is the finished product, and it's 100%, you know, that's where you lose the early adopters.
Actually, it's a fairly simple question, but how hard is it to get districts to agree to go along with pilots with the usual, and, you know, you'll get a real deal when it's a real product? And what's the real reason they're willing to play?
For one thing, I think when you use the word pilot, they automatically presume everything in the pilot is free. And so that's an automatic assumption, and we're in the process right now of, we have a new platform, and so we are piloting, and so the deal with the district is they're paying for the professional development, and they're getting their content licenses for free if they do a feedback. Because I've been down the path too many times where we did give it to them in a pilot and everything was free and they had no skin in the game, and so they didn't have very much of a vested interest in making sure that it was effective. So I don't want to go down that path, but you know, I feel like that you've got there are some superintendents out there that really want to be on the cutting edge, and they want to say, yes, we tried that early on and look at our results, because we're producing white papers about it, and they want the recognition just for their own career bolstering. And so some of those superintendents will be very willing to, you know, put that in place.
More questions from the floor?
Everybody's ready for half an hour.
Everybody ready to go to the bar? Is that the idea?
Be your time.
Yeah, right.
Just one final question. Where do you think the big opportunities are in the market today?
Start at the end and we'll work our way back.
So,
It's a little one.
yeah, these go sort of phases. So when I joined its learning, you know, the learning platform businesses were expanding rapidly. I think we're seeing those in a decline. I think the numbers that were put up this morning around enterprise level systems, they seem to be in decline. I see lots of opportunity in content again. I think content is king, whether it's you know, related to adaptive assessment and adaptive curriculum. That's why I see a lot of startups investing and making some progress there.
Well, the world that we live in with this new endeavor is in one-to-one digital environments. And so we obviously think that there is a movement toward that in various stages. But what I find whenever I'm out with superintendents and with their cabinet is, I think that they see this movement, but they don't know exactly which path to take, and so they're looking for guidance to go down that path. And so I think that the big opportunity is in the aggregation of various companies, various strategies, and if you can go in and be cohesive with that district and come in, and I'll use an example, like one of the situations we're going in with the Alliance for Excellent Education, because they have a wonderful process for a district to go through a self-assessment, where are they digitally, and where are the gaps, and so it helps them to lay out their strategy. In my opinion, if they don't go down that path, they're gonna leave out parts, and if they leave out parts, it's not gonna work. So we like to go in with an organization like that. Sometimes we're requested to come in with a hardware partner, with a software, with professional development, but if you can go into that district and provide them a solution that is more holistic and more comprehensive, I think that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah, and so we're focusing primarily on colleges and universities, and so in that space, I kind of teed up earlier the implosion of the MOOCs being somewhat obvious to some of those of us who've been in the space for a while. But I see similar sets of needs to what Holly was just articulating around digital content and tools, aggregation, curation, and integration. And there's a wealth of resources across the internet, as we all see every single day when we log onto a browser and search Google for the next thing that we're trying to learn. The problem is they're hard to find. Good luck sifting through 387,000 search results for a chemistry topic that you're trying to learn. it's hard to evaluate the quality of those things. So hey, I could create a blog about chemistry today, and you'd find it in the Google search result, maybe if I'm good at SEO, but it may not be any good because I'm not a chemist. So I think the problem is that there's as much rich, high-quality stuff as there is out there. There's also growing amounts of noise out there, and it's not dissimilar from the problem that we saw happen in some of the other traditional media industries 10 to 15 years ago. So in the early stages of the decline of newspapers and magazines as well, and subsequently spread to TV and radio, is you kind of get in the era of citizen journalism, and kind of anyone can write anything anywhere on any topic at any time. Means that in a teaching and learning context, you will find a lot of things, but you don't know what's going to work in a classroom. And whether it's college classroom, high school classroom, it really doesn't matter. So I think really being able to curate and integrate and evaluate those things and bring them together into something greater than the whole, greater than the individual piece parts, is going to be increasingly meaningful. So if you look at the direction Flipboard has gone recently, do we have any Flipboard users in the room? Okay, at least one. I use it too. So yeah, few. So it's an effective way to get information from across the internet. More interesting way to get your RSS feeds and things like that. They've moved to a model of human curation. Have you seen some of their human curated? Yes. So I think the same thing's going to start happening in education as well. As we're going to shift to a human curation model for all the rich resources that exist across the internet, frankly, because there's way too many of them. So it's great to have all these open education repositories, and it's great to light up new ones and create new resources. The question is, how do you find the ones that already exist and the new ones that are being created every day? And how do you know what's new, what's old, what's good, what's not good, what works well for students, what do they engage with, how are you tracking data and metrics around these things? And the answer is today, you can't. So I think that's a massive opportunity. That's one we're directed at.
Good. Thank you. Now we can head to the bar. Thanks. Great job, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Good, I see you.
Back to the start.
I can tell you did it. Yeah, you know, it's all things come full circle. Right? Start out in the world doing little things in little places, and you end up in a big corporation. You're like, wait a second.
I never intended to be there.
Go back, and, you know, at some point you do things right, you get acquired, you end up back in a big corporation. Go back out again. With their cycles, it's like.
Hi, I'm with Educational Marketing.
Glad you sat through it all.
Been reading it for many years.
Y'all are the valiant ones that stayed till the very
happy to
end.
do
How about
so.
you,
Just wanted to say.
where you're going?
I just sat with your.
Thank you.
Long time.
Good, so let me know.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll get in touch with you. Yeah, I really want to.
I also think this is an angle, I mean, if you work in a research-oriented environment that people have yet to talk about in this space, but I can tell you from some of the, I do a lot of consulting on the side for contractor firms and venture firms and things like that.
That's pretty good.
I can't tell you how many times you get asked the question every week of, so what happens to publishing as we go through this digital transition? Well, you know, I'm sure you've heard and been asked all right about it.
Well, you know what I'm seeing now is that people are talking about, I haven't read a lot about it, but they're talking about new life in print in terms of magazines. And I'm a little surprised at that because I actually thought that magazines, not so much newspapers, I
Yeah, it's interesting. But looking at the point in time, the evolution of magazines and digital media, where people are starting to say that they're starting to get it, it's like 15 years in, right? So magazine industry revenues kind of went from here down to here, and eventually you get to a base load where you've got people like us who grew up reading a lot of printed material. We're never going to walk away from it entirely, right? So at that point you say, oh, magazines actually have an interesting business now. It's like, yeah, but it's a much smaller audience.
Yeah,
So it's
the subscribers are waiting. way better. You
Right,
can't
and paid
really-
subs are through the floor, right? It's,
And you can, I mean, I get solicitations in the mail from home, they're kind of paying me.
I know, it's crazy. In fact, I stopped reading magazines in the late 90s, early part of the 2000s, right? Because I couldn't justify. I could get everything online much more quickly than I could in a magazine, right? Just get an editorial, production cycles, and shipping, and all that. But I've only now started to go back and subscribe to a couple magazines again. It's like, wait, so $5, I'll get a year's worth of issues. And I'm like, and how much is the online subscription? Oh, $25. So it's like, oh, I'll take print back. It's not so bad.
Yeah, I won't, you know, news magazines is not anything.
They lost their opportunity window. And having been at McGraw Hill, I know we have one called Business Week, and we try to pivot that thing all the times that I can count.
But like, all our stuff is from this. I mean, and literally.
Yes, when I was in my old chair, I was a frequent purchaser of your
We just got turning prints
Good for them, good for the parent organization to have it.
in July.
Oh, really?
And with electronic education reports, we couldn't move this. And that always for me, I could see educational marketing besides the old traditional one, but the other one was a tablet. But we still,
It's hard to let go. But that's
the layout is still in the.
You can change that.
Okay.
Usually the first step. Yeah, let me know when you're ready.
It's just sales related.
Oh, really? Like maybe Alex? It's very interesting, and I want to know what you're doing now. And did you, was the assessment piece, was that the Grow Network?
No, so it was,
That way I know Frank.
Spill the big secret next week.
CTV, oh, okay.
He and I just
they
happened
acquired Grow
to be sitting right beside each
Oh,
other.
okay.
I did some work with
So he
those
told me a
guys.
little bit about what you guys are doing.
College.
Yeah, I know Jeremy,
David.
Well, and I said
But David I actually didn't know, but
David's running the college board. He brought Jeremy over.
I know. I'm very behind on having lunch with Jeremy, so catching up on all
Yeah,
that.
those two guys, Jeremy lives in New Jersey.
all the
He does? Oh, okay.
velocity and all of that. And so that's an interesting thing.
Oh, okay.
Get together right now.
That
This
and they-
morning chat.
Oh, that's great.
He's a great guy.
He really is. He ran, he was the president of the board I was on that helped at-risk youth. We tried to drag you and get you.
Not into that one.
It was called Catalog for Giving, and it was very cool. So that's what we actually got to know each other then, and then our industry started to cross. But what are you doing now? What is edRNA?
Yeah, so it's a corporate name, so we haven't officially come public yet. We'll do that sometime early next year. But the basic gist of it is, I mean, as I articulated in the session, it's a couple of things like crap.
You think, what am I doing? Yeah, no, I know.
Publishing companies were doing a digital transition. It was trying to be an ebook first model, but trying to have some workflow tools around the ebook. They couldn't get their heads out there
Nice to meet you.
because that's what they grew up on, right? And anyone who's running a publishing company in senior roles all grew up in a book business, right? So it was very hard to shift the mindset. If you didn't have a book, what would you deliver to the market? Right? And that's basically the way I look at it. If the things you had today didn't exist, which is exactly the way it was for me working in this, starting building from scratch. I have no existing assets, I got no brand, no nothing.
Right.
What are the needs in the market? What would I build to serve those needs? So I look at.
Oh, thank you. That was really interesting. Thanks.
So I took a look at what faculty were doing, and most of the faculty I talked to wanted to use some types of internet-based resources and predominantly free resources. And they were doing so in growing numbers. Every study and survey I saw said over 2/3 of faculty around the country are using internet-based resources in their classes and trying to expand the use of those things and trying to extend them even further as a way of getting more affordable course materials, because eventually they're rotating further and further away from the book as a primary source of knowledge and truth in the classroom. And it's not so much the Harvards, Yales, MITs, and Stanfords of the world that are making the shift, because if not, they won't. But at the community college level and our public school level, where education material are a significant portion of the total cost of attendance, there has to be another solution. And the faculty are already going out and finding digital learning materials, and if you look at how they have to deliver those